Well, we are here live, sending out a bunch of peace and love to everybody who's out there. Hope that you're doing well. Sorry, we got started a little late today. Seem to keep having some technical difficulties with this. Well, not just this particular computer, but at any rate, we're on now, and glad to be here with you all. I'm Royce Fletcher Thomason, person who's blessed to be able to serve as a vessel of healing, encouragement, love, hope, and hopefully a lot of other good things. And we're here every Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern time, sharing good vibes with you, and sending out a bunch of love your way. All right. And so we work with a methodology, have been doing so for last couple of decades, called transcending the matrix. So the matrix, some of you might be familiar with, was a movie that came out in 1999, and then they had some subsequent movies called The Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Resolutions that both came out in 2003, which was actually the year that this methodology called Transcending the Matrix was developed. And what it deals with is that the things that we see is the things that we see a lot of times as our reality aren't things that are actually real, such as sickness and disease. I maintain that sickness is not of God. That the things that we end up experiencing as sickness, as disease, as physical pain in our body temples, and all these things are things that feel very real to us, but they're really just a function of the matrix. And when I say the matrix, I'm referring to the matrix of third dimensional beliefs of separation and limitation. All right, we exist in a three-dimensional world. We're multi-dimensional, but we exist in a three-dimensional world, meaning that we exist in a world that has height, depth, and width. Okay, like a difference between a square, a line, for instance, is one dimensional, it only goes one direction. A square, however, is two directions. It has height, and it has width, right? And so, or height and length, one could say. So it's two dimensions. A cube, I should have had a cube handy. I just use my phone. Oh, it has actually, yeah, I just use my phone. It has three dimensions. It has height, even though this is kind of thin, goes from top to bottom. It has length or width, and that has depth. Okay. And so are our bodies and trees and cars and caterpillars and butterflies and ants and mountains and all of these things in our physical world. They're three dimensional. And in the context, matter exists in 3D, in those three dimensions. Physical matter exists in those three dimensions. And so in this context, of these three dimensions, we observe these physical objects as being separate from one another. We see, for instance, this mug being separate from this phone. We see people as being separate from other, we see ourselves as being separate from other people. We see the sense of separation all over the place. And also we see this sense of limitation. We see it show up in terms of we experience in this physical world in terms of love, that there's a limit on how much love. We see it in terms of money, in terms of there's a limit on money. We see it in terms of resources in general. There's limited amounts of resources, and those, a lot of times, those who have more, a lot of times in the form of material wealth, have more access to limited resources, because that with a law of economics is that there's an inverse relationship between supply and demand. In other words, the lower the supply, the greater demand, and therefore the greater the price. And both of these things, this sense of separation and this sense of limitation really are rooted in and bring about fear, which can very aptly be used as an acronym for false evidence appearing real. Everything in this matrix of third dimensional beliefs of separation and limitation, if you will, is false evidence appearing real. It's not real, but it very much appears real. And a lot of times in the process of living life, one of the things that we experience in life as human beings living on planet Earth, and other life forms, quite frankly, experience it too, is the experience of loss, right? The experience of loss. A lot of times we have this experience of loss as it relates to loved ones making their transition and no longer being here with us in the physical world. We experience it sometimes. One of the things that I do, amongst the many things I do, is I teach some classes as it relates to job search in this current market. And a lot of people deal with the loss of a job, loss of income, loss of a sense of security, particularly as inflation continues to rise while interest rates also rise. People, I can't tell you how many people that I've talked with on the street who have lost their home, have lost the support of loved ones, who've lost their sense of hope in humanity. They're people who have lost a lot of things. And this came up to deal with this because I know that there are people who deal with loss, and it's something that I can certainly very much identify with personally. Uh, and I believe that there is some relationship between vulnerability and healing. Okay. I believe, greetings, a curly conscious king. Good to have you in the space today, my brother. I believe that there's some relationship between vulnerability and loss, or excuse me, vulnerability and healing. And what I mean by that is I refer to sickness and dis-ease as the function of is really as a darkness, something that is cut off from the light. And when we bring the light of love into that space, when we expose whatever that situation is to the light, so that the darkness no longer exists there. We don't have to curse the darkness. All we'd have to do is bring in the presence of the light. And in the presence of the light, the darkness automatically disappears and healing is made manifest. All right. And so sometimes it requires a degree of vulnerability. A lot of times people don't want to acknowledge a problem. They're scared to acknowledge a problem. And there isn't really an avenue for the healing of the problem or the restoration of the situation if the problem isn't acknowledged. And so, for that reason, I say there's a degree of vulnerability that's required in healing. Even if you look at the very base level of healing, such as what takes place in the Western medical model of surgery, for instance, even taking whatever form of pharmaceutical it may be. If you're going through a surgical procedure, you're in a very vulnerable state. You're undressed. You're it partially or completely sedated. You're in a very vulnerable state for that to happen. If you're taking some prescription medication, you're even in that situation, you're in something of a vulnerable state because you have placed your trust in the person who prescribed that medication to you, and you've placed yourself in the hands of trusting the company who made that drug that you're taking, that it's actually going to benefit you. Now, I don't deal with surgery or medicines or anything like that. This work of transcending the matrix is certainly much different than that. But it does deal with bringing some light to some places where there is darkness, which can, uh, be somewhat vulnerable. So I'll share, I'll share, I'll start off by allowing myself to be transparent in the context of this sense of loss, because eventually I'm going to ask you if you'll feel comfortable sharing some area where you felt pain or you felt difficulty dealing with loss, or you'd like to experience some growth, some transformation, some freedom, whatever the case might be in that area. So I'm a person who, at the age of 51, have certainly experienced loss in life. We all have, in different ways. As I can't tell you how many things I've experienced separation from, where it was no longer a part of my, no longer present with me. Uh, some of it from different moves I've made, things that were very, very important to me ended up accidentally getting thrown away. Sometimes there have been times I've gone on trip and I had things that mattered a lot to me in some luggage, things that had a lot of sentimental value, material value, and things that had a lot of sentimental value to me, that end up losing on trip. As a person who is truly a romantic through and through, I've lost two spouses and every child that I've ever had. And that's as a person who in 1994 thought about my yet unborn children more than I thought about anything else, right? Uh, going through going through experience of a hurricane, lost just about everything that I had, materially. And I could go on and on and on and on. That's not really the point. But what is the point is that I definitely do understand loss. And I do believe that I've been blessed to experience the grace to be able to handle it, um, to be able to handle it in a way that I feel like has worked for me in some way. Now it could be said now, and at the same time, mm, there's this thing. Uh, I heard a friend say, who happens to be uh, a West African chief, Chief Aishamali Baji. Shout out to you, my brother. And I remember hearing him say a long time ago about mentioning about wearing this world and everything in it as a loose garment. You wear it, you embrace it, you allow it to be a part of your experience and fully, I'm adding this now, you fully embrace it as a part of your experience. And yet, recognizing that the reality is that at any point, anything can be taken away, and then having the grace to navigate the removal of that particular thing that you fully embraced without this tremendous degree of resistance that creates an incredible amount of pain. Now, that is not necessarily something that's easy to do. Sometimes we experience loss. Mm. Sometimes we experience loss, and then we don't want to allow ourselves to feel. Sometimes we experience loss. It could be, loss of a loved one. It could be a heartbreak, and then we close ourselves off because we don't want to experience the pain of that loss again. And so it's this interesting balance between, there's a sweet spot between fully embracing, being fully open to things coming in, and at the same time wearing it as a loose garment, where if it should be removed from you, then you'll somehow have the grace to navigate that well. Okay. And so I want to ask for any of you who are out there today, if there's anything that you've been dealing with as far as a sense of loss is concerned, or even something that you might be dealing with about something that you have not lost at this point, but where there's maybe a fear of some loss, where you might have some anxiety about losing something. In the world that we live in and the reality of the world that we live in, hey, I've mentioned earlier, I've met a lot of people on the streets, people who no longer had the blessing of a place that they could call home. And there's a particular gentleman that comes to mind right now, and uh, seems to be just a really good-hearted human being. Seems to be a person of sound mind. He's definitely an older gentleman. He had been in the military. Every time I see him, this has been on the street. Every time I see him, he's uh, dressed like he's going to work. He's dressed like in a suit and very, um, very kind in his speech and pleasant in his disposition. But the reality of his life experience is that when COVID happened, he lost his job and subsequently his four-bedroom house and vehicle. And now he spends $90 a night to stay in a motel. If he doesn't get the $90 to stay in the hotel, he doesn't sleep indoors. All right. There are people that I've dealt with in different classes that, as it relates to the job stuff, uh, with this nonprofit that I work with, that you know because of the fact that they're in a position where they maybe haven't been working for a little while, having fear of losing their home, have maybe some anxiety about losing their home. There are people who are dealing with sickness, maybe their own, maybe that of a loved one, who may be dealing with the fear of, you know, fear as it relates to mortality, either one's own mortality or the mortality of a loved one. Okay. There are people who experience, fear as it relates to empty nest. Maybe, maybe your child or your children are growing up and they're leaving the nest. And or maybe, maybe you've got children who will still be at home for years to come, but maybe they're moving out of that cute phase and moving into a different phase of life, a phase where maybe they don't need you quite as much. Phase where, for instance, in middle school, you know, parents don't matter as much to children anymore. When children are going through adolescence, their peer group becomes who they're primarily interested in, right? I mean, that's just a reality. And there may be some sense of loss that you're dealing with as far as that, or a fear of loss that you might be dealing with as far as that. So again, anybody who is dealing with anything related to loss, who's maybe having a hard time navigating something that you already have lost, or who, is feeling uh, some discomfort about the possibility of some loss that may take place in the future. I want to encourage you to drop it in the chat and mention what that is. I'm not asking you to do that just exclusively to put yourself out there for no purpose, but so we can do some healing on it, right here during the live broadcast. I'm more than happy to do that. We had somebody on last week who actually physically, well, they weren't physically in the same space as me, but they appeared actually on camera. So they were actually a part of the video, who was in the broadcast last week. And I'm happy to do that again this week. Or if you're just wanting to communicate in the chat, it's not as quick of a communication that way because we're operating on a little bit of a time delay from the time I say it to the time you hear it. But we can still do it that route if that's the route that you feel comfortable with. So again, if anybody is dealing with any sense of loss or fear of loss or anything related to loss, by all means, please put that in the chat. We'll do some healing on it. Otherwise, we'll just do some kind of general healing, which really isn't quite the same thing as addressing your specific situation. But there can be some healing derived from it. If you know of anybody, who's having a hard time with something that they've lost, or something where they're concerned about losing something or someone, again, by all means, please place that in the chat. One of the things I deal with as far as loss is a concern of loss of innocence of the children of today, because there's just so much that's put out there that they have such easy access to that can take away from their sense of innocence. You know, loss can come in many, many, many different forms. And so we're going to be addressing these today, and we're going to do some healing as it relates to a sense of loss, dealing with loss, including the fear of loss. All right, so I don't see that anybody put anything in the comments, so we'll just make it a kind of a general healing today. And so I like to start with a prayer, which I'll do. I really do believe that ultimately God is the healer. That there isn't anything at all, point blank, period, that is beyond God's ability to heal. I believe that, as my late grandfather John A. Hall would say, with all the gusto in my being. Um, and we can be vessels of healing, right? And ultimately, I believe that love is the tool that we work with to bring the healing about, coming from a true, genuine heart space and place of compassion, right? And so from that space, I'm gonna lift a prayer briefly. God, I know you to be a healer, the healer, and the healer of all things. And through the union that we share, through the power of your pure love and your Holy Spirit, I demonstrate your healing and call forth your healing on the behalf of all of those who are on this live broadcast, or even who catch it on a playback, neutralizing the root cause of all pain, depression, anxiety, and all cumulative effects, negative effects of the experience of loss and or the anticipation of loss, from the causal root and the entire energetic structure of every cell of each person's respective bodies, every strand of DNA, every string particle, our existence, from the point of the root cause, and transmuting it into and replacing it with a sense of divine well-being, knowing that we are completely and perfectly taken care of and that all is well because you have us 100% covered, and able to experience a sense of peace and security and profound grace. And I bear witness and I bear witness to our wholeness on this date and in this time and space called now. Thank you. Thank you, God, for this gift of your divine love. It is done. It is done. It is done. All right, so let's get to it. And again, kind of just dealing with loss in general. So I'll kind of touch on a couple of different things, but it'll be again a little bit more of a general healing. And so let's look first of all um, at our socialization in terms of sense of limited resources. Things you might have heard growing up, like money doesn't grow on trees. We want to replace that with the consciousness that with God all things are possible, that there are infinite infinite resources available to you, and they're available to you. And for you to increase your capacity to receive the abundance of the resources that are available in a way that is ethically sound. I'm going to add that in there too. Because a lot of people that feel like attracted to this work are particularly attracted to like being practitioners of this work, are people who have generally have a giving spirit, but in terms of the receiving part, it may not feel quite as balanced. May sometimes struggle with financial things. Sometimes, will give the shirt off their back to somebody, but might not necessarily experience some of the good flowing back to them. So we want to actually transmute that belief system into into the awareness that all good things come, return back to you. That all the good that you do returns back to you, and there doesn't have to be any limit on the good that comes to you and flows to you. Okay. All right. Okay. Sorry. I don't know if you all heard that dog in the background. Apparently, there's a dog nearby barking loudly. Okay. Let's look at. I'm going to deal real quickly with the. I want to deal with the like early childhood experiences of maybe not having enough. Okay. Want to um, a lot of times we don't realize it, but we subconsciously align with that which we're familiar with, what we're familiar with. Choices that we make aren't necessarily based on what's the best choice for us or what's the most healthy, but what's most familiar to us. The things that we welcome into our life, or the things that we may even subconsciously push away in our lives, are a lot of the times the things that we tend to be what we feel comfortable with, and what we feel comfortable with tends to be based on what's familiar to us, and what's unfamiliar, though it may be very good for us, can feel very scary to us because it's unknown. Okay. And so let's transmute that life experience into bringing that which is unknown or unfamiliar, that is for our well-being, into the light. Okay. Because sometimes we can, the thing that we want so desperately, we can not even realize it, be subconsciously pushing it away. We can be pushing it away energetically, even if we're not doing anything physically to push it away, or with our words to push it away. We just might not be in that vibe. All right. And so um, sometimes we can have a fear of loss that's so great that we don't allow something to come to us because we don't want to experience the pain of losing it. Right. Hey, Jennifer Bliss. Blessings to you today, my sister. Hope that life is finding you well on today. All righty. And so let's deal real quickly with openness to receive. Okay. Openness to receive. Openness to receive that which is for you. Ashe, my sister, Ashe. And ditto, right back to you. All right. And so let's look at opening up, our subconscious belief systems um, and unacknowledged uh, unacknowledged fears. And we want to bring the light of love into the space to transmute those things and replace them with essentially transmuting our vibe to align with with our well-being, fully embracing that which is for our good without reservation, fully embracing that which is for our good without reservation. This is a big issue as it relates to love, actually, dealing with other human beings, romantically and otherwise, quite honestly. Okay. All right. So let's yeah, that's needing some more. That's needing some more attention. Okay. So let me look real quickly as far as this is concerned with fear of, ooh, boy, that was a big issue. Fear of abandonment. All right. And they're different. Oh yes, you see my cup. Yeah, that's what I believe it's all about. Listen, when I order food for carryout, I order it in the name of, I don't give my my actual name, that's on my driver's license. I say put it in the name of love. Thank you, Curly Conscious K. But let's get back to this fear of abandonment thing, because this was huge. I mean, that was a huge one. So where is the fear of abandonment connected to? We might have situations where we felt like we needed somebody and who we needed didn't show up for us. We want to reconcile that through the light of God's love and replace it with the experience that sometimes we even don't want to acknowledge that we have needs because we experience needs going unmet. And so we put up this wall around us and we create a sense of, we create a defense mechanism for the pain of not having our needs met by maintaining that we don't have the need. And when we maintain that we don't have the need, we actually push things, subconsciously push some things away. And sometimes, if we have that deep sense of uh, abandonment, then we don't allow ourselves to embrace things. Like I said, it's a delicate balance between fully embracing with all that you have and navigating it gracefully should you be in a position where you no longer have it. That's not an easy one, folks. That's not an easy one. I'm telling you from experience, but I can also tell you from experience that there is a way to it and through it. There is a way to it and through it. And to be open going forward in life, right? Okay. All right. And so let's transmute this sense of fear of abandonment and experiences of abandonment into a sense of security, because you're not feeling secure if you're dealing with concern of abandonment, and maybe the experience, negative experiences of abandonment still coming up as an issue. Negative experiences of abandonment can, whew, gosh. All right, this is a big issue apparently, this whole abandonment thing. Maybe this should have been healing abandonment because of abandonment is coming up as a humongous issue here. So I'm going to kind of hover here for a little while, dealing with things related to abandonment. And so abandonment could be from uh, one or both parents not showing up for you in the way that they needed, the way that you felt like you needed them to. It's like every child has different needs. Maybe you're the only child growing up. Maybe you had siblings, but different of you had different needs. And you may feel like another sibling got something that you needed and you didn't get it. Or you may have felt like um, you may have felt lonely, or you may have felt like somehow they just didn't recognize, maybe you didn't feel like a priority. Okay. Maybe they were actually really working hard to make sure that there was food on the table, and there were some challenges that were present in terms of making sure that was the case. And you might have felt a sense of abandonment in that case. Or uh, maybe a parent wasn't there physically. Maybe they were traveling a lot, or maybe the parent just wasn't in your life, right? Okay. So we want to replace that with the sense of security. All right. Actually, maybe I should have started with feeling abandoned before getting to the parents, because that can manifest as far as abandonment from lovers. Okay. That's actually closer to the surface. The parent thing may be, you know, deeper down. And there's another deeper sense of abandonment than from parents, which we'll get to in a little bit. Okay. So let's deal with experience of broken promises. Like 9,300 of those experiences of broken promises. All right. Okay. All right. Actually, that's still an issue. All right. That number was apparently a whole lot bigger than 9,300. It was whatever is 9,300 with a whole bunch of zeros after that. I'm not even going to tell you that because I want you to get in your head about it, what that number was. It was apparently a very large number, dealing with the collective of everybody who has seen or will see this video. All right, so let me look at and again, if you know anybody who's dealing with some sense of loss, or somebody who you feel like could benefit with this, please share it. Please share it so that they can get the benefit from it too. Whether you're on Facebook, you share it to your own page and why you're sharing it. Or if you're on YouTube, if you can text the link to somebody and tell them why you want. why you want them to check it out. All right, so still in general with feeling like left behind. Ooh, that was a big one. Feeling left behind. Could have been feeling left behind in situations with peers. Could deal with feeling left behind um, to fend for yourself in situations where you needed support. Could deal with feeling left behind, like from the movie series that was out years ago, and well, the book series that ended up resulting in a movie series. Could deal with feeling like the world is passing you by. The song that used to sing in church said, "Time is filled with swift transition. Naught on earth unmoved can stand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand." So let's look at the experience of like so busy going through life that life is passing you by. All right. All right. And let's also look at feeling forgotten about. That was a big thing. Feeling forgotten about. Feeling forgotten about by uh, peer that you peer or peers that you care about. Feeling forgotten about at work, maybe in terms of being passed over for a promotion. Feeling of being forgotten about by a lover or being out of sight, out of mind. Fear of being forgotten about by one or both parents. Or by people you grew up with. Feeling forgotten about by society. Ooh, that was a big one. Feeling forgotten about by society. We want to replace that with feeling we want to replace that with feeling truly seen and heard. Feeling truly seen, heard, and acknowledged. Feeling truly seen, heard, and acknowledged. And I'll even add validate. Yeah, that's an issue. Even add validated to that. Right. Okay. Now, a lot of times we have experiences in life where we end up feeling a sense of abandonment in terms of some of these other things that I talked about. Feeling abandoned, fear of being abandoned in your old age. Okay. All right. Okay. And so I was saying earlier, we experience maybe some sense of abandonment with some of the things that we've mentioned already. And a lot of the experiences that we have later on in terms of abandonment, fear of loss, um, that ends up showing up in our social lives, ends up showing up in our love lives, ends up showing up even in how we parent a lot of times that we don't even recognize. a lot of it is really strongly connected to a sense of uh, an unfulfilled experience with one or both parents, and a sense of feeling abandoned or forgotten about or unacknowledged by one or both parents, or feeling like needs weren't fulfilled by one or both parents, right? Okay. And it goes deeper than that. And there's a lot that's tied to that. A lot that's tied to that, that's buried deeply within the secret recesses of our subconscious, that we don't even recognize, but that can continue to show up throughout life, right? In our blind side. But there is a deeper place than just from parents or whoever reared you or whoever didn't rear you, you know. Uh, and that's a sense of abandonment from God, tied to you entering into the earth, coming from the spirit realm into the earth realm. Okay. And we want to deal with that like on a soul level, in terms of, even in terms of a sense of loss of identity and you forgetting who you really are. I happen to have the blessing of being named Royce, which means a son of the king. And I had a grandfather, the one whose name I mentioned earlier, who would say to my brother and I, he would say, "You boys know that you're the son of a king." Um, and he was talking about God in that context. And so we had heard this. My brother and I had heard this from him for years and years. It was actually while I was in college. I was actually at the mall, at what was the oldest mall in the world, Northland Mall in Southfield, Michigan. Jennifer Bliss, I know you know something about that. It's no longer in existence now. But oh, wait a minute, maybe it wasn't Northland Mall. It was at a mall while I was in college. As I think about it, I don't think it was actually Northland. I think it was some other mall. Um, but I remember while I was in college, I went to one of these things. It was a stand at the mall where you give them your name and they tell you the meaning of your name, and then they gave you this other stuff and they print it out and it was a picture and all this other stuff. Anyway, I did that when I was in college, and I found out that literally the name Royce means a son of the king. And so I have the blessed experience of having that reminder in my name of what my actual identity is. That my actual identity is not as a human being encapsulated in this experience, in this worldly experience, but what my real identity is as a child of God, as um, an offspring of pure spirit, right? And so, but we enter into this earth, and I believe that I strongly believe, again with all the gusto in my being, that a part of the reason why that's the case, part of it for me to remember who it is that I really am, but also that being part of my mission in terms of being able to remind you and others of this truth of who you really are, right? And so dealing with this sense of loss of identity coming into the earth realm, and then we think we're these bodies and these personalities and these egos and this pain and this heartache and all of these experiences that we have, or as we grow older, we think that who we are is the thing that we do to get paid by somebody else. And so we'll make an I am statement. Somebody asks us, what do we do? Which seems to be about the most important question that people have for us, because that's like the first thing that a lot of times people ask when they first meet you, not in a professional setting, but in a social setting. What do you do? And then people respond, I am a. Don't even say what you do. You make an I am statement, which is a statement of your identity. I am a whatever. Okay. But all of that is connected with a sense of loss of identity. And so we want to replace that sense of loss of identity. And what happens that I've seen dealing with people who, a lot of people that have come through those classes are people who are very well educated people. Almost all of them have college degrees. A very significant percentage have uh, degrees, postgraduate degrees, and many even doctoral degrees. Very competent in their field, but then when they end up losing their job, they lose their sense of identity. It significantly impacts their sense of self-esteem and their sense of self-worth. And I get that. I get that. All right. But so let's deal with greetings, Tara George, W, Ski fam in the space. Jennifer Bliss thinks that folk from Tuskegee are like a cult. It's just a very tight knit family. All right. Okay. So let's deal with this sense of loss of self coming from the spirit realm into the earth realm and forgetting who it is that we really are. Because when we enter, for most of us, I sometimes have glimpses of memories of before I came to earth, um, which may seem like a weird thing, to say. That's cool. I embrace my weirdness. Most people aren't doing transcending the matrix and helping folk get over um, injuries on the internet without touching them. So, I'm okay with not being normal, right? Uh, all right. So let's look at sense of feeling abandoned by God by entering into the earth. Feeling abandoned by God when we enter into the earth and we no longer feel that sense of connection with home, with our real home. Okay. All right. And then accumulation of countless experiences through life in this physical plane, in this earth plane, where it seems like God wasn't there. When things that we consider bad happen to us and we feel like we were abandoned, like God abandoned us and wasn't there for us, or that God allowed certain things to happen, that God turned away from us when we really needed it. Okay. And replace all of that. Tanya, hey there. Good to see you. Replace all of that with a profound sense of divine security, a profound sense of divine security, knowing that we are well taken care of, that we're never alone, that we're never forgotten about, that we're always embraced, always cherished. I had an amazing experience in um, October 2003. I happened to have turned 32 on September 23rd, 2003. And I knew that there was a lot of significance connected with that leading up to it. On September 23rd, 2003, I ended up renting uh, ballroom space in the Embassy Suites. And this is on my birthday. What I did for my birthday is I hosted a healing demonstration and presentation. And then the first ever Transcending the Matrix class was actually that Friday through Saturday, September 26th through 28th, 2003. And in fact, three of the people who were in the class had been at that demonstration. They ended up signing up for the class because they had been at that. Three of the people? Two of the people who were at that presentation. They actually both received healing and ended up coming and taking the class that weekend. But on October 15th, I was October 15th, 2003. I was doing, why am I even telling this story now? I know exactly what the story is that I'm telling, but oh yeah, I know. Um, there have been many times I felt like out of place, like the earth didn't feel like my home, right? I remember my mom saying to me, I have a brother named Damien. I remember my mom saying to me once, sometimes it almost feels like you're my son. It feels like Damien's my son, but it almost feels like you're the universe's child. Which is really, really interesting to hear. Um, that was a long, long time ago. It was before, it started with this healing. But anyway, a lot of times through life as a human being, living as a human being on planet Earth, I felt somewhat because I am just I do have a different kind of vibe than that of most. And so, that led to to some degree, some feelings of isolation and stuff. Um, so anyway, I was doing this healing on October 15th, 2003, 3 weeks after the first ever Transcending the Matrix class. And what I was doing the healing on, I noticed that um, at that time, I don't necessarily give a rate for healings that I do nowadays. I was at that point. Um, but I noticed that when I was working with a client who had that specific rate that they were paying me, that the time it took me to actually do the healing was a lot longer than if I just encountered somebody and it wasn't like a financial exchange or anything, and I was just doing the healing on them. And so I was doing this healing on myself instead of getting rid of a tumor or to get rid of pain or to get rid of whatever negative thing per se could show up physically. I was doing a healing on myself to increase the efficiency with which I did healing as a vessel of healing, if you will. And and so while I was doing this healing, I heard a voice say, "You won't have that problem when you remember who you were before, because before you didn't have this concept of time." And so then I asked the question, okay, well, who was I before? And then like that just like opened things up for this really profound experience where I uh, everything changed. And like my whole I had done healing to stimulate my right brain before. Is- I had felt previously these interesting sensations of my right brain just spontaneously activating. Actually, I experienced it for the first time while I was in the middle of doing a healing demonstration and presentation one time. Um, and the left side too, actually, all the way from my third eye to the visual cortex in the back of the head or back of the brain, and all of the top part of my head was like vibrating. I could feel it being very stimulated. It was like 10 times more intense in the center of my crown. And um, it the only way that I knew how to communicate it at the time is it felt like like the mothership was downloading something into my beingness. And it was like this like light, like coming in right through here. And the experience was very, very profound. I didn't even know where I was going to be when I opened my eyes or anything, right? And I eventually did, um, and I sat there and meditated on the experience for a little while. I had to go to the restroom, went down the hall to the restroom, and as I was walking back from the restroom, I heard the word Arcturus. I wasn't familiar with what that was. Um, I wasn't familiar with what that was at all. As a matter of fact, I this past week I made a post on social media, uh, kind of alluding to this. I definitely didn't go into deep, you know, divulging regarding it, but I did kind of allude to it. I heard this word Arcturus. It wasn't something that I was familiar with at all. I did notice the time. It was 11:15 daylight savings time, which is actually 10:15, which is pretend when it's daylight savings time that it's another time. But the actual time would have been 10:15 on 10:15, as it were. And I heard that. I heard it very clearly. I didn't know what that was. A couple days later, this was back. We didn't have a thing back then where there was Wi-Fi. There are or high speed internet. That was back in the days where you actually would maybe use AOL or something, and you'd have to turn off the call waiting on your landline, and then it would dial it. It was dial up internet, so it was a couple of days before I actually went online, and it was Friday, October 17th that I did that. And I was doing research on Arcturus. Turned out to be a star 100 times uh, larger than our sun. At that time, it was about 34 light years from Earth, meaning at a speed of 186,000 miles per second, it would take 34 years to get there. Um, and yet it's a relatively close neighbor of ours in terms of the grand scheme of the cosmos. Um, and then I saw something that was really interesting, and it gave the location. And the way they'll give a location of a star, you know, is it will give a number in degrees. Greetings, Karen. Good to see you today. It'll give a number with the degrees, a sign of the zodiac, and then a number which represents so many minutes. And so, interestingly, the that first number was 32 degrees in terms of the location of Arcturus at the time that I am researching this. Was 32 degrees, which was the age that I had just turned. Remember, I told you there. I felt that there was going to be some significance with the fact that on 9/23/2003, I was turning 32. I just felt there was some significance with it. And, that was essentially uh, when Transcending the Matrix was born, in essence. And, and so this location of the star starts with what my current age was that I just turned like 3 weeks ago. And then the next number is a zodiac sign. Well, I was in labor. My mother was in labor before I was born for 21 hours. I was born in the evening. If I was born in the morning on my birthday, I would have been born a Virgo. But because I was born when I was in the evening, I was born under the zodiac sign of Libra. So here it's got my current age and my, no, I take that back. It wasn't 32 degrees, it was 23 degrees. It was 23 degrees Libra. I was born on the 23rd. I was born on the 23rd. Um, my zodiac sign Libra, if I had been born earlier in the day on the 23rd, I would have been a Virgo. But because I was born when I was on the 23rd of September in the year that I was born, 71, I was born under the sign of Libra. And then the last number, which is the number of minutes, was 32, which was the current age that I just turned. So I thought, wow, that was quite a profound synchronistic event there. And then later I end up seeing something about like some Arcturian healing uh, methodology, which I thought this is really interesting because what I'm focusing on now more than anything else is healing. And then the third webpage I came across was talking about Arcturian civilization. Now, this might be a little bit too woo-woo for people. If that is, so be it. I'm just sharing from my own experience. And it was talking about Arcturian civilization. Everything that I was reading was really resonating with me profoundly. There were other people in the room. I was reading this out loud. At some point, I read something that was just so compelling that I stopped mid-sentence and tears just started pouring down my eyes. And I happened to have had some music playing. The song that was on was The Impossible Dream, Luther Vandross's version of The Impossible Dream, which we play in the Transcending the Matrix classes. And that same moment that I had read this thing that stopped me in my tracks mid-sentence, the words were being sung to find the unreachable star. And so, like in that moment, like I felt this profound sense of love, and like I had never been alone as I had often felt in life. You know, as a reminder that I'd never been alone. I've always been watched over. I've always been seen. I've always been seen, right? Um, and you know, all my life, even though I was born on the first day of fall, my whole life, my favorite season has been the spring. Well, I also came to find out that it is during the spring, the season of spring here on planet Earth, that the star Arcturus appears in the sky. So, you know, anyway, I didn't mean to go on such a long tangent, but what it is that the point that I ultimately wanted to bring home is even though we may have times where we might feel alone, even though we might have times where we feel forgotten about or we might experience a sense of abandonment, and even though we might forget who we are at our core, in truth, we're never alone. Now, everybody isn't going to resonate with that Arcturus thing the way that I did and do. But the reality is you too are never alone. And we want to definitely program in for in terms of replacing that sense of abandonment from God, abandonment from your tribe, abandonment from the star system that you call home, or whatever your your lived experience on earth might be, transmuting that with feeling that love is always around you, and that love is always with you, and that your loved ones are always with you. Okay. All right. I did not realize it is now 2:14. I don't know how long I was telling that story. I know I can be a little long-winded. Apologies for that. Um, if it put anybody to sleep. Uh, but we'll go ahead and do a couple more corrections, and then we'll wrap it up for today. So let's look at let's look at like anxiety about future loss. Okay, which is really dealing with fears of the past projected into the future. So we want to neutralize those fears of the past projected into the future. Um, Call forth profound healing as it relates to that moment in time, resolving the lived experience and the version of you that experienced that at that point in time, and openness to a new, more fulfilling experience. Okay. And transmuting that anxiety into peace and confidence in your well-being. Okay. That's actually looking better. All right. And let's look at, do one more correction. Let's look at sense of guilt and shame about what you've lost and what you've made that mean about you and your sense of identity, and any guilt and shame about um, how you felt in the presence of loss. Even if what you lost you knew wasn't good for you, but could still be very, very, very painful. So we want to replace that with a sense of comfort, kind of turn on the all clear signal in the brain, know that you're safe, that you are loved, that you are protected, that all is well. Okay. So I give great thanks, God, for this healing that's taking place today and the manifestations of your divine love. I affirm it is done. It is done. It is done. Ashe and amen. All right. Well, that wraps us up for today, good people. If you, and by the way, I know that where this is generally seen the most is on Facebook. I'd like for people to check us out a little bit more on YouTube. I know that Jennifer Bliss started off on Facebook and then moved over to YouTube during the broadcast today. We would like to be able to reach more people via YouTube, because quite frankly, there's some people that just aren't on Facebook and would never see us there. So if you would go and check out, even if you already viewed us on Facebook, if you'd go to the Matrix Healing YouTube channel and and subscribe to our page, and if you feel inclined to comment or to like what it is that we've said. The comments that happen on YouTube Live, on Facebook Live, the comments stay there. On YouTube Live, they don't. They'll only stay there, I believe, if you comment after the fact. But at any rate, it's certainly been my pleasure to work with you today and offer some support in this area as it relates to loss, dealing with loss. And if you would like to uh, become a practitioner of this work, which has been one of the most profound blessings in my life, not only being able to do this work, but being able to share it with other people, be able to give other people the keys to unlocking this beautiful and profound, expanded realm of possibilities. Oh my goodness, it's been a very great honor for me to be able to do that, and to be able to share that has been an even bigger honor. Um, you're very welcome, Curly Conscious King, who says, it's been a great dialogue. Said earlier, this has been a great dialogue as always, and have a, for all of us to have a wonderful week on purpose. Yes, may we all have a wonderful week on purpose. Yes, may we live as if it's on purpose. May we flow through life as if it's on purpose. Um, but if you're interested at all in training and being able to have some of these secrets unlocked for you, if you will, because the reality is that, you know, those of us who are doing this work have seen some really profound things happen. And those same things can happen for you and through you in the lives of other people as well. And so if you like to explore uh, going further with this methodology of transcending the matrix, reach out to me on, either send me a direct message here on Facebook, I could see it technically, I guess, if you send it on, if you put a message on YouTube. I don't think YouTube has a way of sending direct messages anymore. It used to, but I don't think that's the case anymore. But you can send me a direct message on Facebook at Royce Fletcher Thomason, or you can send me a direct message on Instagram at either Royce Fletcher Thomason or at Transcending the Matrix. And other than that, know that I love you. And I hope that you have an absolutely wonderful rest of your week. And we'll catch you next time. Peace and love, everybody.